Daoibh guys agus fáilte go dtí an fhíseán seo Learn Irish Online. Agus neoltán chéad fhíseán a gin inar sraith nua darbh ainm made easy. In this series, guys, we're going to be looking at all seemingly the most complicated and complex ideas, concepts, and rules in Irish. We're going to be looking at things like the Modh Coinníollach, the sraith, séavús, urús, conjugations of different verbs, for example, things that a lot of people have problems with and things that a lot of people sometimes even avoid completely because they've heard that it's quite tricky. But a lot of them are way easier than you think, guys, especially if you simplify it down to just a few quick and easy rules, and that's what we're going to be going through in these videos. Today we're going to be looking at the Modh Coinníollach, in other words the conditional tense in Irish, and this more than anything else, for some reason, whenever I mention to a new student, maybe that we're going to be beginning to move on to this, you can see almost panic in their eyes. The Modh Coinníollach, for whatever reason, has a bit of a reputation for being quite tricky in Irish and something that people avoid. At leaving a certain level back in school, when you have to learn it in Irish, it's seen as the most difficult thing you can probably learn, along with the Fhíseáin Coinníollach, and something that you're forced to use. But in reality, it's just another tense. All we have to do is learn the conjugation for it, and that's pretty much it. It's a lot easier than you think. There are one or two tricky rules here and there, which aren't so much tricky in themselves. They're just easy rules to forget when you're conjugating the verb. So we're going to go through them, and hopefully by the end of this video, the Modh Coinníollach will seem a lot easier and a lot simpler than it might have done before. So, firstly, what do we mean by the Modh Coinníollach, or the conditional tense? Sometimes with this, it's just important to get what you actually mean in English first. So essentially we're saying any verb with would. I would do, he would drink, they would go. Anything that's conditional. It may or might not happen, but the easy way to remember it is just would in English. So, just like every other tense, such as the past, present, and the future, we have to conjugate it, guys, and we're going to do that with endings. Obviously, we're going to be using our root of a verb and then slapping on one or two things at the end of each root. However, what makes the conditional a bit different to, let's say, the present or the future is that we're going to have slightly different endings depending on which person is doing the action. If you think of normal present tense, for instance, tugann mé, tugann tú, tugann sé, she, all the way down to shead. The verb doesn't really change from person to person. We just change the pronoun. However, in the Modh Coinníollach, it will change from person to person. We've one ending for first person, so I would, another ending for second person, you would, and then we're going to have a different ending for all of the ones below that. So we have three endings altogether. First person, second person, and then all of the rest. So let's just look at a verb to kind of get a grip of what it's going to look like and what those endings might be. Always with a new topic like this, guys, one of the best ways of doing it is taking a quite simple verb like ri, which is irregular, and it can't take any sort of a form of a séavú or an uru, nor does it begin with a vowel. That's really your checklist in Irish for the most regular verb you can get. For I would run, it's going to be rihin. That's a hin sound at the end. Notice as well, this is a fused ending. So what do I mean by that? It means the may is already fused in there. We don't need to say rihin may, and in fact, if we did, it would be incorrect. We can just say rihin, okay? For you would run, we're going to say rifá. Again, same idea. We have the two in there already. So rifá, you would run. Now it changes a bit and becomes a bit more normal than what we're used to from third person all the way down to third person plural. It's going to be rithuk sé, rithuk she, rithuk muid, siv, and shead. All the same. So it looks a bit similar to, let's say, the future tense ending, but quite a different sound. But these are your three sounds which you're going to have to remember, guys. If you're going to take anything from this video, take this. Hin for first person, fá for second person, and then uk with the pronoun for third person and down. Let's look at another verb to kind of get used to it a small bit more. So lig meaning to let. I would let is going to be lig hin. You would let, lig fá. He would let, lig uk sé, and then all the way down. So for example, if I'm saying they would let, lig uk shead. If I'm saying we would let, lig uk muid. Okay, so first person, second person can be a bit off-putting in their form, the fact that they're fused endings, and the fact that they don't really bear any resemblance to what we've been used to at first and second person. There's no M in the first person, no T in the second person. But it is what it is, just have to learn off those two endings, and that's going to be the same for basically every verb in the language. They're just going to have the hin for first person and fá for second person, and then from third person and noun, it's much more like what we're used to. Same ending for each one, and it's just an uck sound. Even if it's FADH instead of FEADH, like we've looked at so far, it's the exact same sound, uck. Now, why have I looked at verbs that have been a bit simpler so far? Well, it's because we've two extra small rules we also need to remember. One, any verb that can take a H will take a H in the Modh Coinníollach. And number two, we're going to put a D apostrophe on any verb that begins with a vowel or an F. Hopefully by this stage you're used to the idea, let's say in the past tense, that we'll always use a chéad, and in the past tense, any verb that begins with a vowel or an F will also take a D apostrophe. So this is where it almost takes one or two rules from the past tense. Let's look at again one or two examples. If we know tig is the root of understand, all we're going to say is hig hin for I would understand. So we just put that little H in there after the T, like we would do for, let's say, the normal past tense, but we'd just be using the root there. We wouldn't be using an ending. So hig hin, I would understand. Hig fá, you would understand. Hig uck sé, he would understand. And what do you think she would understand is going to be? Yep, the exact same ending. Hig uck she, hig uck muid, hig uck shiv, hig uck shead. Then, what about our other rule, bringing D apostrophe in? Well, that's about all it is. Let's say if we take a verb like éist, to listen. For I would listen, I'm going to say déist hin. For you would listen, déist fá. He would listen, she would listen, déist uck sé, she, all the way down again. So see, it all comes back to really just knowing these three endings. Hin, fá, and then uck for he and all the ones below that. Then we need to remember our two little rules. Put a H in and also put a D apostrophe in. And that's essentially it. There's not too much more to it, guys. Obviously, we've one or two little caveats we have to add on, but nothing too major. Let's look firstly at long verbs. Obviously, like you've probably seen before with the present tense and the future tense, the long verbs have slightly different endings. And knowing those endings, especially in the future tense, is going to come in really useful here. Let's say in the future tense of to buy, for example, we don't say can he, we say canoi. Okay, we add the little O sound in, whether it be through an O fada with the broad ones or an EO with the slender ones. Well, we're going to do the same thing here, guys, with the Modh Coinníollach on the long verbs. So, with to buy, for example, I would buy ceanóhin. Okay? You would buy ceanó fá, he would buy ceanóach sé. So it's the exact same sounding endings, the hin, the fá, and the uck, but the only difference is we're just throwing on the little vowel in the middle, in this case an O fada. The best tip I can give you for the long verb ones, guys, is make sure you know them well in the future tense. Because if you can think what a long verb is in the future tense, you can straight away kind of get the shape or the feel or the sound of the verb and then just change the ending. So if you know, for example, that I will speak is laroime, you've already got the laro sound. Just add on your ending. Larohin, larofa, laroach. Simple as that. And then all we're left to really deal with is the irregulars, which can of course always give us some trouble. In Irish, thankfully there's only 11 of them. And again, for the Modh Coinníollach, it's not too tricky. There's just really one rule you need to remember. That rule is to use the future root. So what do I mean by that? If you look at any regular verb, guys, in Irish, what makes it regular is the fact that it uses the same root. Look at tig, for example, which we've already dealt with. It's hig me, I understood. Tiggin me, I understand. And tiggy me, I will understand. We're using the tig there every time as the root. But if you compare that to something like, let's say, the verb to go, probably the most irregular verb in the Irish language, we have hui, chain, rocky, we have dull then as the verbal noun, we have che as the actual root itself originally. So how do we know what to use? I know I need to put the hin, the fá, or the uck at the end, but how do I know which root to use? It's just use the future root. That's just, again, going to be another rule which you're just going to have to learn off. Like the G apostrophe or the H, we're going to have to remember that with the irregulars we use the future root. But again, once we have that, it's pretty straightforward. It's just going to resemble the future. So I would go rockin. You would go rock fá. He would go rockuk or rockuk sé. All our other rules are still going to apply for the irregulars. So if we're dealing with a verb like, let's say, to come, and we know in the future we have chuck as the future root, we're going to say hiocuk muid for we would come, for example. We still need to put our little H in there. Equally, if we're dealing with something like, let's say, feck for see, which is another regular, we need to put in both the D apostrophe and the H as well, because it can take both of them. So What do you think he would see would be, for example, if we know fech is the root? So remember to add on your ending, put in your H, put in the G apostrophe, and you should have at the end Jekok she for he would see. So what else does that leave us with? Well, nothing. That's basically it. Again, it's this idea that it's a big feared concept. It's going to take absolutely weeks to learn. It's going to be borderline impossible. Even after a lot of practice, I'm going to be struggling with it a lot. But that's basically it. We've gone through it in, I think, about 12 minutes, and hopefully it's been relatively straightforward. Again, it's just about remembering the same rules over and over again. It's about remembering our 3 different endings, which will vary in spelling, whether it's broad, slender, long verb, short verb, but don't let that put you off. It's all going to have the same sounds at the end of the day. It's just that hin, fa, and uk sound. Then we need to remember to put in a D apostrophe anytime we start with a vowel or an F, and we need to put in a H on any verb that can take a H. For the long verbs, we're just going to look to the future tense to try and get just a shape on the verb and understand where the extra vowel is. Let's say, for example, cianoime, I will buy, and then cianohin, I would buy. That's going to mean we can just slap on our normal endings at the end. We don't need to think too much about the full ending of ofala inn because we already have the shape of the verb from the future tense. A similar idea then for the irregulars. If we have a verb like to go, where seemingly every different form of to go looks completely different, we're just going to go to the future tense. We're going to get our root there. So rockime, we're going to take rock, endings on again, as always. Rockin, rockfa, rockach she, muid, shiv, sheed, all the way down. So hopefully that has simplified the Modh Coinníollach so far. Guys, 2 more things I'd like to mention in terms of further studying on this. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're not going to have access to the PDF on the Modh Coinníollach, which essentially puts down in written form everything I've talked about here. To get that, you need to head over to learnirishonline.com, where a lot of you might already be watching. Everything completely free. Just put in your email. You'll have to put in a quick password as well, and you'll get access to a downloadable PDF, which has everything I've mentioned on a nice little file there, which you can download and print off. Second thing, for further studying on the Modh Coinníollach and any tense in Irish, your absolute best bet is changlin.ie. Not associated with them in any way, but they are great, and there's not many websites like this that have such great resources for Irish grammar. All you're going to have to do is type in the root of a verb, like I am on screen now. You're going to hit search, you're going to head over to the Grammaduck tab, and then scroll down until you see the drop-down menu. Once you see that, open it up and click on whatever tense you like. So after this video, hitting away on the Modh Coinníollach or the conditional is going to be very useful. One thing you might notice while you're on there, especially on the conditional, is that the we and they have slightly different endings. For example, Rachaimis and Rachaidis for we would go and they would go. They'll probably give those alongside rockach muid and rockach shead, the ones we've talked about. Those are optional endings. If you want to use Rachaimis for we would go, for example, or any verb with the amish ending, and adish for the they would ending, then feel free to. Again, it's more of a thing done in Munster, but they're not mandatory like the first and second person. So I think it's a bit easier to teach than when you're learning. Just do first person, second person, and then third person onwards, all the same ones. But if you want to use the amish and adish ending, especially if you want to learn more so Munster Irish, or you are living in Munster, then maybe better to learn that, but completely up to you. Agus sin é, guys, ní leon rud eile, really, gur mí las bheith féachaint ar an fhíseán seo, agus mar dúirt méid tá lán fhíseán cosúla seo ag teacht ar Learn Irish Online ar an YouTube agus freisin ar an Sibh Idirlín é féin. Sa sráisiúil ba muid ag déanamh lán rudaí cosúla le cad rinnemuid an nó leis an Modh Coinníollach, agus tá méid cinnteach mai sé Harbh carúil le ar chuid Ghaeilge agus le gach rud atá sibh ag déanamh faoi láthair leis an Ghaeilge. So, gur míle maigí agus feic mé sibh sa chéad ceann eile.